So we're on chapter 25, and it is on World War II. And we're going through the first part of the chapter that has to do with the road to war. So what really caused World War II to happen, you know, and what was going on prior to this? We know that World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars, you know, but it didn't happen. Only 20 years later, we had World War II. We talked about the ideas and beliefs that were going on during this time in the last video, and went on to discussing the dictatorships of Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what was going on in Japan at this time, and how Japan was pulled in to be in the axis of these world dictators. And why would that be? Why Japan? Because in Japan, there was militarism that went on in Japan. After World War I, Japan looked for military solutions for social, economic, and spiritual problems. You know, looking into such things as, you know, into Buddhism and Hinduism and all these things. In Japan, they had no foundation of Christianity much. So, but looking, I think of militarism, I think of Japan as the samurai. They focused on samurai warriors, very militaristic in being. So, but Japan, more than that, needed raw materials for growing their industry, and they needed more farmland. They only were on that small island of Japan, and they needed to feed their population, which was growing, using broader markets. So the militarists followed the tradition of the samurai, and this was a warrior class with a war, and would want to conquest and make other countries come under absolute submission to their divine emperor as the high duty. They actually worshipped their emperor. So haiku ichiu says, bring the 8 corners of the world under one roof. Sound familiar? Sound like the New World Order? He wanted to bring the 8 corners of the world under one roof. In Japan being one part of that control, if not the main part. And to create a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere of Asia and Pacific. So basically Japan wanted to control that Asian side of the country and the Pacific side, which included China. So Japan, of course, needed raw materials, farms, and markets. And so in doing that, they would attack and try to control parts of China, especially by invading Manchuria. So they seized Manchuria in 1931 to provide for this and to control Manchuria as dictators of Manchuria. So here's a picture face of militarism in World War II. Here we picture though Japan had an emperor, the military had taken control of the government by this time. Their emperor actually was worshipped, but their emperor didn't stand up to the powerful generals at this time. And one of the generals, as we see here, was General Tojo, right here. And he being that. So, in fact, the emperor was pretty young at this time, you know, and he was worshipped and often, you know, he stood with the generals, but he had no power really to stand against them at this time. So that's what's going on in Japan. Unchecked aggression was going on in the world. When I say unchecked aggression, these dictators were becoming very aggressive, and no one was doing anything or helping or doing anything to help countries that were being taken advantage of. So first of all, in Manchuria, with the Japanese aggression and takeover in Manchuria. In Rhineland, with Hitler sending troops in and making Rhineland their demilitarized zone. In Ethiopia, with Mussolini taking over Ethiopia? In Spain, both fascists and communists used Spain as a testing place for their weapons and tactics. You know, after the Spanish Civil War was going on there, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. In Austria, Hitler supported the Socialist Party, then marched and seized on Austria. Austrians didn't have time to even fire a shot. In Czechoslovakia, which was even worse, Czechoslovakia had to surrender their Sudetenland to Hitler. And later, Hitler took all. When I think of that, I think of Bohemia, Moravia, that very rich area. Hitler wanted that area, and he would demand that area, and later on, he would take over all of Czechoslovakia. So, and the Czechs would try to fight, but they had no time and no support from any other countries at that time. This is before the World War II had started. In Poland, then, Hitler came and conquered Poland with Nazi Soviet control. He made a deal with the Soviet Union that he would give half of Poland to them, and they would conquer Poland. So the first Blitzkrieg, was called Lightning War, and that what began in World War II, and that's when World War II actually began with him, with Hitler conquering Poland. So we're going to go over each one of these. So just a little overview, and you see what these things are going on. Unchecked aggression in these countries. Let's go back to Manchuria. Manchuria, where is Manchuria? It's northeast China. Here we have Japan here, and you see Manchuria, Korea here, and Manchuria, Japanese going in to control this part of China. So this was important to Japan because of its natural resources and its location for a base to conquer. They wanted to use Manchuria as a base to conquer all of this because Japan was looking to rule the world, right? For a base to conquer and control China. So in 1931 to 1932, Japan conquered and renamed Manchuria Manchukuo, and set up a puppet government, Manchukuo. So in Japan then left the League of Nations, of course, and in 1933, it cared not to negotiate on what it was doing. The League of Nations basically saying, what are you doing? Taking over Manchuria? But Japan didn't care. So the United States then would not recognize the Japanese occupation of Manchuria and said, no, well, the United States was not recognizing it. Basically, we had a lot of missionaries in China in this area and had a lot of industry going on with China. And at this time, the United States, seeing what Japan was doing and how they were horrendously treating people and civilians in this area, was horrific and devastating to the people. And the United States knew about this. So here we have China, we have Manchuria, Mongolia, basically Japan wanting to control this area. Now, what about Hitler and the Rhineland? Where's this Rhineland, and what was Hitler? How did he start off his plan, his vision of ruling the world? So in 1935, Hitler put forth military conscription for all German men, and he developed an air force and built submarines and warships. So first of all, he said they all had to join the military. All men had to join the military, no matter what. And then he started building an air force, building submarines and warships. All these things, basically, the Treaty of Versailles in World War I said that Germany could not do this, and he was doing everything that Germany was told they couldn't do. And so, because the Treaty of Versailles had limited Germany's army to only 100,000, but they had now growing over 600,000 men in uniform. And so he violated the treaty in 1936 by sending troops into Rhineland. And this was the demilitarized zone west of the Rhine River. And Hitler was just eager to use his military strength. So here we have, this news here, Hitler's invasion of Rhineland. It was called Act of War by France, because where's Rhineland? It's between Germany and France here, Belgium up here. But here we have that border there that he basically was not to be occupied by Germany. Now he wanted it, and so he would come in to take the Rhineland. So, and both Britain and France, they objected, but they didn't do anything. So his gamble paid off. So he thought, well, I'm going to try to take over the Rhineland, see if they even do anything. And guess what? They did nothing. And the League of Nations, they didn't do anything either. So this increased Germany's support, the German people and such. Okay, so they're not going to do anything. Let's get going. So German had a secure western border now, and it was called the Siegfried Line. That was on Rhineland. This line is called the Siegfried Line. That was their border, and they felt it was safe now because they would occupy the Rhineland, and they would control now the industry that was there for war goods and produce more war goods. What about Ethiopia, for goodness sakes? That was one of the ones I thought, well, why would Mussolini want to attack Ethiopia in Africa? You know, Ethiopia had a very primitive people there, and they surely didn't have a lot of industry going on. So Ethiopia was one of the oldest Christian nations in Africa. It was formerly called Abyssinia. Haile Selassie I, he lived 1892 to 1975. His name meaning power of the Trinity. He claimed to be ancestry to the Queen of Sheba and Solomon, you know, in the Bible, you know. So there were a lot of Christians in Ethiopia. In 1935, Italians invaded Ethiopia. The Italians with Mussolini, the dictator Mussolini. The Ethiopians fought with spears and little guns, you know, against the Italians, had tanks and planes, for goodness sakes. So the League of Nations voted for economic sanctions against Italy, but then withdrew them, and which actually encouraged Mussolini and said the League of Nations is going to do nothing, and they did nothing, you know, to help Ethiopia. As Haile Selassie went to the League of Nations, he basically said here, Mussolini attacked Ethiopia to expand the Italian Empire. Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, appeals to the League of Nations for help. And basically he says, it is us today, it will be you tomorrow, which indeed it was. And so here we have a picture of, you know, Italy coming in with their tanks and everything, and all these primitive people trying to fight them off with spears and such. So this is, why did Italy attack Ethiopia? Or you wonder why? You know, I thought that was one of my big questions. So by conquering Ethiopia, Mussolini hoped to link Italy's existing colonies in the East Africa, Eritrea and Somalia, you know, to basically owning those to the side. So Italy had possession of Somalia and Eritrea right here, and in between, they wanted to unite. Well, why did he want to do this? Because Mussolini, he had the foundation that he wanted to have a new Roman Empire. And basically, I could say he probably discussed this with Hitler, you know, in the midst of thinking, well, I'll control Africa. So basically thinking that basically later on in time, he would have the full control of all of Africa. So that's about the only reason you can think that he would want to take over Ethiopia, which he did. So, and we have, you know, British Somalia here and up here. So he wanted this whole area, and there'll be a lot of fighting in the midst of Africa too. The whole world was drawn into World War II. Spain. So what was going on in Spain? Well, they were having a civil war, and it was a very unique civil war because it was against, you know, the communist socialist ruler and the fascist ruler, Francisco Franco. So when I think about it, I think, well, it says 1936, a revolution against Spain's socialist government began with a civil war, and the fascist leader, Franco, who was supported by Germany and Italy, fought against the Russian communists and other socialists, even American expatriates. What's that mean? At this time, I told you, there was quite a few Americans that were considering to go into socialism and communism. And they actually were centered too and interested in the Spanish Civil War, being against a fascist group and a communist group is very unusual. And so you can see how Spain would be divided in half, probably in more than half. You think, which do we go? The worse or the worser, that both of them were terrible, so. But anyway, Franco defeated the communist forces and established up a dictatorship in 1939. And of course, then we have Hitler, Nazi Germany, and Mussolini from Italy, both looking in on Spain and coming in to support Franco. In the midst of this, this provided a ground for World War II. So the Germans came in and the Italians came in, and even the Russians, they all tested weapons. They used the Spanish people as a scapegoat and tested their weapons in Spain. Used the place, we can develop our terrorism right from Spain. It says the Spanish Civil War was a brutal conflict it against the left and the right. And anyway, in this whole thing, it was a bloody war which saw 3 years of war, murder and execution of 35,000 people. It was terrible, terrible war. 1936 to 1939. In the midst of this now, it's war-torn. Fascism was coming in, have a dictator, and they're using Spain as a place to test their weapons and such. Oh dear. The formation of Axis powers, the tripartite, I say it right, tripartite treaty. The tripartite treaty, what is that? Oh, it's going to be a treaty between those 3 Axis powers that we already went over. They would get together and unite into the Axis power to take over the world. So in 1936, Hitler recognized Italy's claim to Ethiopia. Basically, Hitler, he actually consulted with Mussolini and, said, yeah, good deal, go in and get Ethiopia. And so he formally joined with Mussolini and he organized the Roman-Berlin Axis. That was the first. It was first Roman-Berlin Axis, New World Order, Roman, from Rome to Berlin, the revived Roman Empire, that's what they called it. And this would be their axis. Then Germany and Japan then signed this anti-Comintern Pact in 1936. And so Italy signed the tripartite treaty with the 3 of them. And now they had Berlin, Tokyo, and Rome axis, wanting to control the world. They intended the world to turn on this axis. The axis would be, basically the world's going to be turning with Berlin, Tokyo, and Rome. So these would be the 3 main aggressors, and they'd be known as the Axis powers. Here's pictures of them. Hitler, Mussolini, and Tojo here. And here's the picture. Here's the emperor. Like, oh dear. Emperor of Japan. The Second Sino-Japanese War. So now we're talking going to Japan. Now we have Japan flaring up. In 1937, Japan staged an incident in Beijing, China, and fighting broke out. The Japanese controlled most of eastern China's parts, Manchuria, remember, and the industrial centers and the rail centers. Nanking was a large Chinese city, and the Japanese burned it and raped and looted and slaughtered the whole city. It was horrific. The rape of Nanking, they call it. The nationalist Chinese government at that time was not communist, it was nationalist. The Chinese government was under General Chiang Kai-shek, and he was very, very much of a friend of the United States of America at that time. And he was already engaged in a civil war against Chinese communists under Mao Zedong. So Mao Zedong was basically challenging him at the time. Here's a picture of Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. Challenging him at that time. Of course, China was not communist yet. And later on, we'll find that Mao Zedong takes over and basically becomes a major murderer of millions of people. But anyway, but Chiang Kai-shek now, at this time was basically now going to have to fight, not only fight against Mao Zedong, but now it's going to in the conflicts that were going on in the Chinese Civil War, but now would have to fight against Japan attacking. And so nationalist China had to move its capital up the Yangtze River because Japan was attacking them too. So they were again being attacked on two different sides. One really miraculous thing that happened was for China at this time was the American General Claire L. Chennault. He lived 1893 to 1958, and he had a group of Americans that went to China to fight against Japan's aggression at this time, called the Flying Tigers. And they were a volunteer squadron of airmen, and they fought against the Japanese against incredible odds. Let's just say that. They were very much heroes to the Chinese people at that time. And they were Americans, the Flying Tigers, air combat action. They probably can watch a movie on that one. Hitler turns attention to Austria now. So publicly, Hitler declared that Germany, he said to the whole world, Germany neither intends nor wishes to interfere in inner Austrian affairs or to affect the Austrian annexation, saying Germany doesn't want to have much to do with Austria. He said, we're not going to hurt Austria. But secretly, he did just the opposite. He encouraged and supported a socialist party in Austria to undermine the government. While everyone was looking the other way, he was undermining the Austrian government. And in 1938, his first move after the Rhineland was to march his troops into Vienna, to the capital of Austria, and seized control with Austria without even firing a shot. Here's a picture of him going into Vienna to the Austrian and taking over. Germany took over Austria even after he said, oh, I have no intent to do this. So, and Czechoslovakia was next. So Czechoslovakia was ethnically a diverse empire after World War I, and it was broke up into these smaller units in 1918 into these smaller states. Czechoslovakia comprised Bohemia, Moravia, and Slovakia. So they had very strong German minority in the Sudeten Mountains there, and the Czechs had become most prosperous, very prosperous. They'd become a very prosperous European country despite a Great Depression, like they were being blessed, you know. They were surrounded on three sides by German territory, though. And so they were confronted by, all of a sudden, by 3.5 million Sudeten Germans, you know, and many of these supported Hitler. So as they came in, Hitler again, you know, he had gone in and got support in these areas. And some of the Sudeten basically now had got together. He had, of course, you know, Hitler put this all together. And Hitler demanded Sudetenland be Sudetenland be seceded to Germany. Sudetenland, how you say it. The Czechs, the Czechs, though, didn't really want to accept this. They were ready to fight. You know, how could he come in and just take over our land, especially this rich land that basically had Christian roots of Bohemia and Moravia in the midst of this. This is, you know, Hitler looked at this and looked as Christians, you know, basically he's saying he himself was Christian, but in the midst of this, he looked at those that really took forth any gospel in any way as enemies. You know, you can see this in the midst of the attack on Bohemia and Moravia. At least that's what I say. That's kind of my addition, but you take it or leave it. The negotiation of the Sudetenland Munich Pact. Okay, the Munich Pact. This was amazing. thing that happened. I kind of like it took a pause there to think about this, but so the French and the British prime ministers. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, he lived 1869 to 1940, of Britain, and the Premier Edouard Daladier of France flew to Munich, Germany, in the fall of 1938. They're basically saying, well, what are you doing in Czechoslovakia here? And so they met with Hitler and Mussolini. And the British, they wanted to negotiate for the Czech citizens, although there were no Czechoslovakian leaders there at all. It was just basically, France and England and Germany and Italy, so as Mussolini was there. Hitler publicly assured the world that Sudetenland was his last claim in Europe. And the Czechs were then not allowed to be there to negotiate, so which they wanted to do. The Czechs were not happy with being controlled by a dictator. But at this Munich pact, this Munich conference, they gave in to Hitler's demand. This was not a good thing to do. They signed this Munich pact on September 29, 1938. And this gave Sudetenland away to Germany. Chamberlain signed this non-aggressive pact with Hitler and informed the British people that the pact meant peace for our time. So basically Chamberlain said, yay, he's going to just take this land and then he'll be done. All he wants is to have this Czechoslovakian land, And so here we have a picture of the Munich conference here, and you have Germany getting Sudetenland, and Hitler there making promise that he's not going to do anything else. And then we have here is the prime minister, waving the pack in the air and saying, this is peace for our time. Not really, huh? So, So as Chamberlain signed this non-aggression pact with Hitler and informed the British people that the pact meant peace for our time, but, however, Hitler, by March 1939, occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. Not only did he take over this little piece of Czechoslovakia, but the whole thing. And so, in fact, he put a puppet governor or puppet ruler of in Prague. His name was Heydrich, and he would become called the Butcher of Prague. And he took the leadership and terrorized the people there of Prague and of the surrounding area of Czechoslovakia. Here's a picture of him. And later on, he was actually assassinated by the Czechoslovakians. And then Hitler came in to punish Czechoslovakia and killed towns of people. Like a town of 1,965 people were killed, and then took another 4,000 and put them in concentration camps, the same concentration camps that he had put Jews in. He put a lot of Czechoslovakian people in there too, Bohemians and Moravians in those, put them in the camp to basically cause terror because their uprising and assassination of his butcher. He was a really, really, really bad guy, let's just say, killing and torturing people. So I'm not going to get into that. Albania. So Hitler then encouraged Mussolini to seize the tiny country of Albania in April of 1939. And this would provide a springboard for an invasion now that he wanted to go in. They both Mussolini and Hitler would want to be involved in invading Greece and Yugoslavia. So Hitler again, now they seized this little country. He had Mussolini do it. Here's Italy, which was controlled by Mussolini, and here's Albania. You can see how close. Basically, they thought we can use this and set up our military, and then we can go in and attack Greece and Yugoslavia and on, attack the world. Italian invasion of Albania, you see. And here we have pictures, cartoon of Mussolini looking back at England and France and saying, this will teach you a lesson. And he has the poor country of Albania in his arms, so. Italy launches an airstrike and land on Albania. Here's the picture. 2,000 Italian troops were killed. This is going back to Ethiopia. First of all, he attacks Ethiopia. 2,000 Italian troops were killed during this attack. 27,000 Ethiopians were killed. And then he takes Libya and Albania too. So you can see, Poland was Hitler's next conquest. Now we're going to talk about what started World War II was Hitler's treatment of conquest of Poland. So Hitler violated the Munich Agreement right away. Basically, remember, he signed it, and Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of England, said, hey, look, he signed it. Hitler's done. There's no more. We're at peace. No way. He signed it. He's a liar. You can sign anything. Never believe a dictator in signing agreements, right? So Hitler violated this agreement, and he demanded Poland relinquish the Polish-German corridor and give Danzig to Germany. So he wanted an area of Poland now. But in the meantime, the Nazis had completed fortifications known on the Siegfried Line because they wanted to make sure that France had the line there, the Maginot Line, that they so that they could attack Poland without the French interfering. So basically, what that is saying is that the French now they were preoccupied. And so they would not be able to just come in and help Poland. So he was devising that France would not be able to be there for help. And then he also feared that maybe the Soviet Union on the eastern part of Poland would come in. So he signed a non-aggressive pact with Joseph Stalin in August of 1939. So he said, basically, this included a secret plan to divide Poland between Germany and the Soviet Union. So he had it all going, didn't he? He said, basically, France would be preoccupied here because now he controlled Rhineland and he'd be able to put his troops there. So if France would start to step in, they'd have to deal with his troops before coming in to Poland. And now he had this plan that he had said, okay, Joseph Stalin, I'm going to attack Poland and take over Poland, and I'll give you half of it. Well, that way Poland had on both sides were surrounded by Germany and were not ready at all, had no idea that this was happening. The big blitzkrieg of Poland, lightning war. So Hitler was now free to conquer Poland without France and without the Russians being involved at all. So on September 1st, 1939, the Nazi war machine moved into Poland. Stuka dive bombers destroyed the Polish Air Force on the ground. That's basically coming down and bombing the people on the ground. The Panzer tanks, the divisions overwhelmed the Polish cavalry. Polish soldiers and civilians were bombed and strafed as they fled. As they were fleeing away, they were hit by machine guns from the airplanes that were flying, from the German airplanes. After 4 weeks, Poland was under Nazi Soviet control now, and Poland was being stabbed in the back by the Russian invasion from the east. So they didn't know Russians were invading on the east, Germans on the west. They had the world's first blitzkrieg lightning war. Blitzkrieg is now that term that Hitler, of his type of war, to hurry up, they went in and just bomb them and get them so confused and not knowing what was going on, so they wouldn't have enough time to prepare for war. This was called lightning war, and that's what they did with Poland. So war was declared on September 3rd, 1939. The French and the British delivered ultimatums to Germany, demanding the withdrawal of all German forces from Poland. The Germans refused the demands, and Britain and France declared a war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939. World War II had begun a mere 20 years after the signing of the Versailles Treaty that gave the peace for World War I. World War I, 20 years later, World War II. Can you believe that? So we're going to end there, and we're going to get into how the war, all the developments of the war, and getting into how the United States got involved in World War II.